var dünyadaki. it out by yourself.
If we're all settled in, I'll call the meeting to order. The first thing would be roll call. Yeah. You want agenda? You don't get one, you're talking. No.
Alan,
Alan present. Good morning.
good morning. Juby. Here. Leonard,
Leonard here.
Sanchez, Williams,
Williams present.
Roth,
Roth here.
Kenyon,
Here.
Pirog, Tepe. You have quorum.
All right, so we've called the meeting to order. We need a motion or some kind of a motion to approve the minutes. It's just
Move for
Alan
unanimous
moves the minutes.
consent of the January 19th minutes.
Unanimous consent. Is that what you want, Debbie?
Yes.
Does anybody,
good.
everybody agree with the approving? the minutes?
No objections.
Okay, let's stand to approve. Is there public comment? Is that you or the food bank guy? Here's the food bank guy. We have Corey Incandela. What is?
You got it, in Candela.
Corey's good enough. Huh?
Yep. Corey works. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Corey Incandela. I'm the new Communications and Advocacy Specialist at the Northern Illinois Food Bank. I am taking over for Tracy Kelsey, who I know was a representative to this committee in the past. She's actually running her own nonprofit now, so we're very excited for her. And yep, I'm looking forward to working with all of you and being the representative to this committee. I just wanted to give a quick update from the food bank. Just some data from our operation. So last fiscal year, we distributed 78 million meals. And we anticipate sort of doing the same and sort of keeping along that pace for this upcoming fiscal year, which ends in July. The only difference is from July to December of 2022, we served an average of 456,000 neighbors. And to put that into a little bit perspective, in January of 2022, so about a year ago, we were at 350,000. So it's gone up about 100,000. And then July of 21, we were at about almost 300,000. So it's a 50% increase pre-pandemic levels of the amount of people that we're serving. And with SNAP emergency allotments coming to an end at the end of February, we're expected to see more strain on our agencies as well. So with the SNAP emergency allotments ending, we're expected to see around a $95 to $225 decrease in SNAP benefits per household per month. Going off with our food budget as well, our food budget for purchased food has dramatically increased this year. We're at about 21 million budgeted for this year in purchased food. So that's around 26% of our budget. In years past and pre-pandemic, that was around 10%. So that is a big strain on our budget. So just going forward from a farm bill perspective and on the federal level, we're really going to be advocating and speaking with our legislators around strengthening SNAP benefits, particularly with low income individuals and our military families as well. And then our TFAP program as well with our government purchased food. And just speaking to Chris Mortensen and our area leader for this region and Jake Lamplow, our food procurement coordinator, we're always looking for partnerships with local farmers. So if you know anyone who is interested, we'd always be receptive to those kinds of partnerships and conversations. So thank you.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, Alan,
All right, Debbie.
I just wanted to ask why anyone would reduce SNAP benefits. Is this an attempt to cut the country's budget by taking away the food opportunities for the most vulnerable? I just don't understand it.
So these SNAP benefits were part of the emergency orders. So everyone who receives SNAP has been receiving the maximum allotment for SNAP benefits. So since emergency orders are ending, and this was part of the omnibus bill as well. So say you have a family of four, a maximum allotment for a SNAP for a family of four is around $939. So everyone was receiving that maximum allotment. So in normal times, a family could be receiving $700 a month. So with that maximum allotment, everyone received that top level at $939, but in normal times, someone might be receiving $700. So it'll just go back to what it was previously with the emergency orders ending.
Thanks for the explanation. It doesn't help, but I appreciate the explanation.
Okay, we'll call on you again later. You're not getting out of it this season.
Thank you. It was nice to meet everyone.
Would you like to speak to Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Kenyon. And I've got a PowerPoint which he will log up. I was asked.
Who are
to-
you?
I'm Michael Montgomery. I'm the Executive Director of Food for Greater Elgin. So this is a more ground level reprise of what's happening in food need. And so I'm stalling so that he gets the PowerPoint. But you know, you call attention to something and it goes half as fast. There we go. All right, next one. Thank you. So let's look at the timeline. In June of every year, the government determines what the fiscal base for SNAP is going to be, because in October, then they apply an inflation adjustment. That has gone up. In last year, there was a lot of inflation, so there was a very healthy increase in October, but they were already behind. In January, then Social Security payments get changed. And this year, though, they went up a very healthy 10%. But that was a mixed bag for many seniors, because suddenly many of them were no longer eligible for SNAP benefits. We saw at Food for Greater Elgin about a 10% increase in seniors who were coming to us from both from last January to this January, and from December to January. You know, 1 month issues, there's always weather, there's always holidays that sort of mix things up, but there's a market increase in seniors who were started coming to us for food. Then on March 1, the end of the 15% enhancement allotment hits us, and there's a 15% cut in benefits. The minimum benefit goes from $238 to $23 for a family. So if you were really getting benefited because of the COVID policies, you're really getting hit come March 1. Then in May comes the big one, because they've held recertification of need in abeyance during COVID. And in May, that kicks back in. And if you're not recertified, you can't prove your need, then you lose all benefits. Now, obviously, if you're wealthy, you shouldn't be getting benefits. But we will also have people who aren't able to fill out the forms, can't work through the paperwork, especially with seniors. So everyone's working very hard to get people in the process. But oh my gosh, you know, if you ever watch a train wreck, you can see it coming for a long time, and we're in that phase now. So let's move to the next slide, please. So the key data is the federal poverty level. If you're a senior, it's $14,036 a year. In a family of two, it goes up to $17,689. If you're a non-senior family of three, you're deemed by the government of being officially poor at $20,172. While all of the government programs have moving numbers and they don't all move at the same time, in general, SNAP benefits are 165% of the federal poverty level. And you're eligible for food pantry assistance at food pantries that get emergency food program from the USDA if you're under 185% of the food pantry. So for a family of three, you're not seniors, you can earn up to $37,000 and be eligible for coming in to our food pantry. Whenever we get a new guest, one of the processes is that they have to certify that they meet those eligibility standards. Next slide. So there's a gap between people who are eligible for SNAP but are still considered to be poor enough that they need food pantry help, from food pantries. And food pantries have a legal and moral requirement to serve people who come to us in need of food. You shouldn't be hungry in this country. The contract we have with the Department of Human Services is more specific than that, which is that any resident in the state of Illinois must be served the first time they come. You can kick in all kinds of rules after that, but the first time they must be served. We are also legally forbidden from serving cheeseheads. You can't serve people from out of state. So it's the no cheesehead clause in the contract. So what we've got right now is a perfect storm heading to us because benefits are being cut because of sunset rules that were set into motion 3 years ago. But need is also rising. We served 83,000 people in 2021. In 2022, we served 130,000 people. We can move to the next slide and you see the comparisons between Aurora Interfaith, ourselves, Northern Illinois as food bank for all of Kane County and for everyone in Kane County. And this is just looking at January data. Because from 2021 to 2022 is a pretty standard. And for interfaith, it went down a little bit. You know, it depends on weather and other sorts of things. In January of this year, it's up sharply. It's up sharply for ourselves and for Northern Illinois Food Bank and for all of the food pantries in Kane. What's happening? Well, seniors are coming to us. Aurora and Elgin are also places that get a lot of people who are immigrants and recent arrivals. Yes, they are legal residents of the state of Illinois. Yes, we are required to serve them. And they're here. So there are people who need help and need food. We have the next slide, please. So we're seeing pretty substantial increases in the number of people who need help. And this comes at a time that the supplies of food that come to us are dropping. And especially the foods in the categories of meat and produce, dairy and eggs. We were spending $3,000 a month to buy eggs in December. The same with milk. And my board decided, you know, we can't sustain that over the long run. So we've stopped buying eggs and supplying that for people. When we get donations, we then target them for seniors. But now we've stopped buying 2% milk. And they're, you know, my life's in danger now because seniors, they do not like this 1% stuff. But there are a number of pantries, I'm told, that are now dairy-free. They can't afford to give out milk. They can't afford to give out eggs, and some that can't afford to do meat. We've been blessed in the last couple of months with the ARPA funding that came from the county to Northern Illinois Food Bank, but that is not going to last forever. And while the left hand does not always know what the right hand is doing, I was told that's probably going to be running out in March, and is that about right? Sounds right. Okay, so it's, you know, it's coming to an end quickly. And so this short-term benefit to us from January to now is about to be over. And we're hurting. We've got higher need, we've got higher expenses. We've taken the tack that you can't be a food pantry if you don't have food. But oh gosh, you know, my board of directors can see another train wreck coming if we continue down that path. And we need some help from the county to be able to attend that. So there's a proposal before the ARPA committee. We're praying that would be taken up and passed, you know, 3 months ago. But as soon as it can be on the agenda, we eagerly await it. But that's really where things are at. Good. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Madam Chairman,
Thank you very much. I understand the critical need. I've asked you to present this information at a previous committee meeting. But Mike, I think I have a legitimate concern that we all have to be very thoughtful with that goes beyond just your food
Mhm.
pantry and the food banks and throughout Illinois. ARPA has already supplied some resources to you. There potentially may be more, but it's not sustainable because once that money is depleted, ARPA money is a finite resource.
Mhm.
Money is a finite resource. What other opportunities have you coalesced around in the Northern Illinois Food Bank to make this need satisfied? Because it is a growing need.
Right. We are-
If I can finish, I don't believe that milk, please correct me if I'm wrong, eggs, milk, butter, meat, chicken, et cetera, are going to go down appreciatively. I think if it's a commodity
Mhm.
and profit needs to be made through that commodity. But how do we provide the necessary food,
Yes.
life-sustaining food, to a needy population?
You're absolutely right. What I am told by Chris Mortensen, our area NIFB rep, was that the expectation is that the chronic shortages of food, the supply chain issues that are part of the problem right now are expected to last until next year. But that this is a short-term problem and therefore ARPA funding becomes an appropriate use of it because
is a bridge
it's an
then.
extension of the COVID problem. Now, at the other time, the first time Chris and I had that conversation, he was saying in fall of 23, this would be worked out. And now he's talking about another 6 months down the road. And that's sort of no one really knows when this is all going to be worked through. We are promoting this as much as we can. Go to our webpage and you'll find fundraisers, and we're looking for sponsors and all kinds of things. But really, it's a key problem to raise money, and we're working on that as hard as we can. Changing the farm bill in Washington is an important step. That's more in NIFB's hands than ours, but I don't think they listen to them necessarily. We're reporting our monthly totals of people to Senator Duckworth's office so that they have ground level insight as to what's going on. So just educate, educate, educate.
Perhaps one small gesture we can make here, and we could talk about this at this committee perhaps next month, is to write a letter of support to Senator Duckworth for the Farm Bill appropriately. That may be, at least it's a voice in the right direction.
That would be helpful, I'm sure. There's one other step, which is on the 28th. The Illinois Extension Service has a listening session for farmers interested in growing in truck farming to raise local foods of vegetables that then can be sold through a USDA program to be given free or reduced prices to local food pantries to get to. And I've got 2 copies of that here. And delighted. I'll leave.
If you
those.
leave one, we could make a copy of it, make sure everybody gets one.
All right.
Okay.
We'll be planting sweet corn again, and I'll increase the number, but
Thank you. We'll increase the pickers.
then you'll get more pumpkins too. Any other questions, Michael? Oh, we could segue into the Farm Bill part of the thing with Mr.
Seg-
Arnold.
Segue, we will. So a bright spot in regards to our hungry neighbors. The Farm Bureau did its 22nd annual shopping spree for local food pantries on Monday of this week. Representative Matt Hansen, a former King County board member, shopped for the Aurora Interfaith Food Pantry, and Wabansie Community College's new president, Dr. Brian Nettle, shopped for the Two Rivers Head Start Agency. They set records. They between the two, in a 7-minute shopping spree, they gathered $3,978 worth of groceries that the Farm Bureau purchased and donated to those food pantries. Representative Hanson also made personal contributions to each of the food pantries, so we appreciate that that very much. I think that over the 22 years, the shopping sprees have benefited 24 local food pantries in the county. And Corey was here, Northern Illinois Food Bank, and Jewel Osco and Batavia have been partners with us in that effort for 22 years. What I put in front of you is 2 selected pages from next month's Kane County Farmer, and there is at least the beginning of a brief report on Monday's shopping spree in that newspaper. 2 other opportunities in regards to food security on April 4th, and this is not in that publication, or it's not in these 2 pages of that publication. Our Young Farmers Committee will meet the FFA chapters at the Northern Illinois Food Bank to repackage food April 4th from 5 to 7:30. And in this upcoming Kane County Farmer, we invite any of our members to come in and assist with that repackaging effort. More on the policy side, on March 2nd, the Illinois Soybean PAC, Political Action Committee, will host a gathering at Schmitztown Tap in Elburn with Max Armstrong. And it's really to talk about, to get farmer input from a soybean grower's perspective on the upcoming Farm Bill. And in all agricultural circles, you'll find great support for the nutrition title of the Farm Bill, because we understand if there was not a nutrition title, there may not be a Farm Bill. So if anybody is interested in that opportunity, since it's a political action committee, I believe it's $50 a person for drinks and heavy hors d'oeuvres, but an opportunity to meet with Max Armstrong and the president of the Illinois Soybean Association is Steve Pitstick, who is a farmer in Maple Park. So a local farmer that will be helping host that event. A few other things, and they are largely in regard to what's in front of you, this preview of the Kane County Farmers, or Kane County Farmer. First of all, I talked last month about our We Are the 96 campaign, a public information campaign to let consumers know that 96% of Illinois farms are family owned and operated, because consumers believe it's 47%. So there was a commercial during the Super Bowl. I want to thank Mr. Van Kerkhoff for sharing that information on social media through LinkedIn. He got a lot of traction, and I apologize that none of you saw the commercial because it did not run in Chicago markets, but it did run in downstate markets. Perhaps next month, when we don't have so much on the agenda, I will bring that commercial in and show it as one of a series of 6 commercials that you're probably going to encounter more on social media than you will on television. But one of a series of 6 commercials that we're running in that campaign. And it features 2 local farm families, the Linkaitis family dairy farm in Campton Hills, and the Gould family grain and pork farm in Maple Park will be featured in those. In addition to thanking Mark, I want to thank Jody. Jody Walnick will be participating in a March 2nd pollinator workshop that the Farm Bureau is hosting during Institute Day. So we have 51 teachers coming in for the day to learn more about pollinators and water quality. And Jody has agreed to be a presenter as part of that session. Just a couple other things. on the front page of this King County Farmer, it talks about a rules for the road trucking seminar. Don't know that any of you are interested in that, but that's a big need in the community. And so we try to do something like this once a year to let farmers know about changes in rules, and driver training opportunities. You've all probably heard about the trucker shortage. Our statewide association has a scholarship program for people who are trying to get their certification, their license to drive trucks. And we had a young man from Maple Park, Brennan Kiefer, who received one of those. I think it's it's $1,000 scholarship. I was going to say $1,250, it's $1,000 scholarship. And we have a not-for-profit foundation that will meet next month, and we'll consider matching that. I don't remember the exact cost. I talked to Mr. Kiefer, but I was surprised at how much it costs now to actually get your license, to go through a course to get certified for truck driving. And then one last thing, I think, no, it's not my last. On the back of that page is a quarter page ad about our 17th annual Touch a Tractor, which is a Farm City event that we do at the Farm Bureau on Randall Road in St. Charles. All members of the county board will be getting an invitation to a legislative meet and greet on Saturday, the 15th. That will precede what the University of Illinois Extension and the 4-H Foundation do every year at that time, which is a pork chop dinner next door at the fairgrounds. So we hope you mark your calendars, and we'll send something in the mail to tell you to mark your calendars, and an invite to that activity. And then just a couple of public policy things real quickly. Bills that we are tracking. One is bills to amend House Bill 4412 on wind and solar energy projects, specifically to address agricultural impact mitigation agreements, which all of these developments should be subject to. And the second is to make sure that drainage districts have some authority when these projects are sited and when they're constructed. Jody and I have talked about concerns that the county has also with that legislation. And then I passed on to Mr. Van Kerkhoff this morning information on a new Senate bill, proposed Senate bill, SB 2011, which creates an Agricultural and Natural Resources Legacy Act through the Illinois Department of Agriculture. And it's very early in the legislative session, but I'm sure that Mark and his staff will take a look at that and see what kind of impacts that might have on King County's farmland protection program. But it does intend to develop a fund for farmland protection purposes statewide. So that's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. Arnold? Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I just started reading, so I don't know very much about a bill that was recently passed that was passed last year, that is going to incentivize soy and corn for airplane fuel. And again, not being a farmer, I assumed that there's a certain type of corn and a certain type of soy that is necessary for that, different from soy or corn that we would consume. If this is going to be a wonderful opportunity to reduce air pollution, have a more organic fuel for our airplanes, but what is the impact on our fields of growing edible corn and soy? Is it going to be turned over? So there'll be more production of energy rather than like an ethanol, rather than in production of other kinds of corn that you'd use as a commodity for food.
I could take an uneducated guess at that. So while there are attributes, certain attributes that you may be looking for depending on the end use of corn or soybeans, like high linoleic acid, in soybeans. Generally speaking, at least at the early stage, I'm not sure that they are looking for any particular attributes. They're just looking to increase the domestic markets for corn and soybeans for energy production. So as these things develop, it may be possible that processors are looking for specific attributes, but I'm not aware of anything right now that that is necessary to sell to a plant that is, whether they're producing ethanol or whether they're producing biodiesel. And I think that I'm going to say jet fuel for lack of knowledge. I don't think that that's any different at this point. So.
Mr.
I can speak a little bit. I know the military is experimenting with going 100% of bio because of the whole issue on concerns about petroleum. But also the Ag Lab back in the 60s was researching percent of converting plants and also tumbleweed and stuff. And the reason I knew that, my dad was a chemist there at the time, and that was part of his research.
Are there any other questions?
And I just bring this up because I want to make sure, in light of the conversation that we just had, that it's very important that if our fields can produce food right now because of the critical shortage of necessary food, that is incentivized if appropriate.
In my reading, I read an article that was talking about the UK. And they're now limiting the number of vegetables you can take out of a grocery store. And when I was at the shopping spree, they had a wonderful display of fruits and vegetables. But you can imagine if you could only take a pound of potatoes or a pound of green peppers out. But they're anticipating a shortage in the United Kingdom. And our problems are always worldwide. You think we've got the only problem, but it's all over. Now, under Partners in Conservation, we have another young man that's going to speak.
Hello. Sorry, I'm no good with these things. My name is Patrick McPartland. I've been here in the past. I work over at the Canopage Soil Water Conservation District. Going to talk about the Partners for Conservation dollars that we have for financial assistance for implementing conservation practices in your field. It is a soil water conservation district update, so I unfortunately have some news that if you're familiar with our office, our longtime administrative coordinator, Elizabeth Hagen-Muller, has passed away last evening after a long battle with cancer. So keep her in your thoughts and prayers, and just know that if you're going to be dealing with us in these upcoming months. So as he's pulling up the slides here, I'll just go a little bit over what I'm kind of talking about here. So our Partners for Conservation dollars are funds that we get from the Illinois Department of Agriculture. And it's pretty much a one-to-one agreement with the landowner to implement practices to address any water quality concerns or soil erosion. So you could jump to that next slide there. So looking at just general rates for those practices, we cover all sorts of different things, including first-time no tillage or cover crop users, things like filter strips and either grass waterways or rock-lined waterways. The pricing of those is based off of the state average for those practices. So it'd be 75% of the state average. So cost of operations up here seems to be a little more expensive, but it is something. If you got an eroding drainage way and you want to put some type of perennial stand of grass on there, it's going to need to meet the NRCS practice standards, but you could get some cost share based off of the acreage of the grass waterway. You could also implement something like a pollinator habitat, or even in a more urban landscape, something like a rain garden as well. And then if you're really feeling optimistic and want to address nutrient concerns, put something like a constructed wetland at the end of your field, and we get cost share for that as well. So if you want more information about those and the different practices and then the rates with those, I could send you the whole list. And I just ask, as a result of this, if you know anyone that has a need or a desire to increase maybe a habitat on their landscape or address some soil erosion concerns, just send them my way, and I'm more than willing to meet them out in the field and go over something. So next slide there. And then with that, we have the Saving Tomorrow's Agriculture Resources. This is something that was spearheaded from the Champaign County Soil Water Conservation District. It's pretty much tied with the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. It looks at your field and it looks at all the water quality concerns. And it gives you a grade off of how your farm is doing when it comes to the nutrient loss reduction strategy, and kind of guides you in the right direction to maybe improve all those potential nutrient concerns coming off of your field. And it's getting a lot of traction throughout the state, and part of my position is promoting this program. So next slide there. And this is the form that you'd fill out. Sorry, it's a little tough to read, but it would go over if you have any best management practices, what your rotations are, what your coverage is, nutrient inputs, all sorts of things like that. Next slide. And then there are other things I just want to promote, that we do have a couple people in the office that are looking to get more experience developing conservation plans. So if you want to put some type of conservation plan in place for your field, that would get you, when more funding opportunities become available, maybe potentially something more lucrative than our Partners for Conservation program, you'll have a plan in place so that you can implement those practices and quickly meet those application deadlines. And then there is if you know anyone with a filter strip, there is a filter strip certification program with the Illinois Department of Agriculture that they ask us to market each year as an option. And then obviously we have all the programs with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So we're fully staffed with our NRCS office now. So feel free to reach out to them if you want to see about the options for any of their cost share. And then the next slide, I think that's all I got for you. And so there's my phone number and my email right there. If you want to follow up with anything, feel free. And I appreciate you guys' time for letting me speak today. Thank you.
I think, Mr. Leonard has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got a question for you with respect. I'm not real knowledgeable in this field at all, so I'm trying to learn a little bit more. So this may be a stupid question, but what is a filter strip?
Yeah, so a filter strip is an edge of field practice. So say, like for example, a Garfield Farm over in Kane County, they have a stream going through their property, and so they have a little patch of woods that lead into the creek. But with the filter strip, they add an additional perennial stand of grass that's going to be able to address some of those nutrients that are coming off of the field and let that sink into the soils before ultimately making its way to the stream. So for the most part, if you got a stream on site, you would be looking about like maybe a 20 to 30 foot buffer. So you'd be taking land out of production and then putting it into that perennial stand to address those nutrient concerns.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez?
That was my question as well. I'm familiar with the practice, but I didn't know the term. Now I do.
Yeah, and if you want some photos, I got some too. So
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. What? You gonna buy a farm? Now that you're retired, you could buy a farm and do these practices. Okay, soil health updates.
Yes, good morning. This is a good transition. So coming up in March 6th through 10th, the Illinois Stewardship Alliance is hosting the second annual Soil Health Week. This is a week-long educational program to promote the health of soil, the importance of healthy soil, and just providing a bunch of trainings in person and online to build awareness for not only why soil health is important, but just different practices and techniques that farmers can use to continue that. Next slide. There's also during that week, there's also a lobbying day activity that goes along with this. But again, this is just really focused on a variety of different presentations that's going to include farmers, conservationists, scientists, advocates, and more. So you can go on to the Illinois Stewardship Alliance website, and you can just see each of the different sessions that are going to be organized. And we're going to be promoting that through our network as well, so that folks can find the sessions that are most relevant to their needs. Next slide. This is a map of prime farmland in Kane County. And so this is actually based on data provided by USDA. So USDA identifies what is considered prime farmland. And so they have a definition. This is just part of that definition. But essentially it identifies the soil that is most suitable for producing crops. And it's based on soil chemistry, pH, the soil's ability to retain water. There's a variety of criteria that USDA uses to characterize this. So the map illustrates where prime farmland is, which is the darkest layer, as well as the lighter green, which is prime farmland if it were drained. And then the lightest layer is farmland of statewide importance. So this is land that is, doesn't quite meet the criteria to be prime farmland under USDA's definition, but this is typically this category is for the state Department of Agriculture to identify farmland that is still of significant quality and productive capability. And if you were so inclined to read the full explanation and criteria of prime farmland, you could follow that link there. Next slide. So why is this something that the county is looking at? Obviously, soil is incredibly important. It is the foundation for life on this planet, and it is an ecosystem where you have mineral matter with organic matter, but also air and water. And this combination is really important for the biological activity that needs to occur that really produces healthy soil. And even though that organic matter, I mean, you can see that that's really a small slice of that pie there, but that is such an important piece of what determines healthy soil.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, question.
What's biota?
Biota.
Biota, that is a good question. I will follow up to give you a specific answer
Very
on
good.
that.
Stump the presenter.
Got me.
I think it's the microorganism. right?
Okay. Next slide.
He's got to have a phone. Why don't you ask Google what it is?
I'm on it.
Yeah, I'll look it up for you.
Next slide.
Marine life? She says it's marine life.
So this is a diagram that's probably typical of what you would see in a high school or junior high textbook, kind of illustrating, obviously you have the sun working with plants through photosynthesis. And then it's actually the roots and the byproduct of the root material that contributes a lot of the organic matter to soil. And so that in turn feeds all of the other, microorganisms, insects, and other wildlife kind of moving up that food chain there. But when we look at what constitutes healthy soil, we're looking at, a lot of it has to do with how water moves through soil. So you see those, the right side illustrates an aggregate of soil, which is basically like a clump or a crumb of soil. And, healthy soil has those pores that allow water, air, and other material to move in, and a lot of that, and contribute to a lot of that biological activity. Next slide. And so this is a better look at kind of how water moves through soil. So soil that is healthy or aggregated, water will move through that soil very easily and be retained in the soil. Soil that is, less healthy, it's impacted, it has other issues. Water is going to run off the top of the surface, and in a lot of cases carry nutrients and other materials with it, and then that gets drained off of the fields. And next slide. So this is a couple of I'm going to show a couple of pictures here in sequence and just kind of illustrate how some of the different practices can influence how the soil composition can be affected, how water drains through soil. So on the left-hand side, you have a field that was cared for with no-till practices. On the right, you have a field that is tilled conventionally. And so you can see that standing water is present there. And I will note too that in these side-by-side photos that the soil composition and quality is similar, if not identical, to account for, just to make sure that there's a common denominator between these. So next slide. And so here you can see a photo with that hasn't been planted with cover crops on the left, and on the right you have cover cropping. And even though you do have some water runoff on the cover crop field, you can see that that's, it's cleaner. It's not pulling the soil with the runoff, whereas in the left-hand side, you can see that the topsoil is really just being drained off the top of the field. It's being washed away. And next slide. And then in this last side-by-side, this shows some of the differences in on-field practices. So the left-hand side involved a diverse production system. So it, rotated grains, vegetables, animals, and grazing, and what would be considered more of an integrated management practice. And then on the right, a more conventional operation that included tillage with a more limited rotation of crops. I believe this was a rotation of strawberries and sweet potatoes, and that did not use cover crops. And you can go on to the next slide. And Patrick already touched on this, so I just wanted to emphasize that there are some partners in the region that do provide some really great references and resources for protecting and preserving soil. So obviously the Cane DuPage Soil and Water Conservation District is one, along with their conservation cost share program. And then if you move on to the next slide, the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, they have an office in St. Charles, and many of their resources are online. And they, their philosophy really kind of echoes what I've been emphasizing today as far as minimizing disturbances, maximizing biodiversity, and so forth. So those are resources that we wanted to call attention to. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on this.
Oh, Mr. Roth.
Yes.
The definition is plant and animal life in general. So the type of plant and animal life found in the certain region. So I guess it's a mix of animals and plants that are growing in that area. I did have a couple questions. I remember 40 years ago, they were pushing, no-till solutions because of the runoff. What % of our farmlands are they doing no-till? And are there any disadvantages to doing it?
That is a good question. I don't have the percentage, but I know that as far as I don't want to say disadvantage, but a potential cost is that there is some different equipment that is needed as far as
Because you need the-
planting
the
is
drilling type
concerned.
of, right.
I, Steve or one of our, agricultural practitioners might have a better explanation of that,
Okay.
but it is not without, some additional upfront.
And they're gonna, I know I'm dating myself, they used to rotate crops a lot, and it doesn't appear they're doing that as much anymore. And are they making out with fertilizer and stuff to, is it just because of, trying to be as productive as possible? Or what?
Right, and we, and I can share this as well, but when Janice and I went through a training that was hosted by the American Farmland Trust a couple months ago, they did include some case studies that showed, what the cost difference is if you are adopting certain practices, whether it's cover crops and no-till, and what the additional, upfront investment is. But then on the back end, there is a savings as well, because you are using less, or in some cases, no fertilizer inputs if you're able to maintain more nutrients in the soil.
Right.
And in some cases, keeping, or I believe in some cases even, increasing productivity.
Okay.
But that's, there are a lot of variables that can go into that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Was there another question over here?
And then I did just have there were a few, I don't know if you can pull it back up, Blair, but I did have a few just quick announcement slides at the end here, so you can go on to the next one. I believe this is what Michael was mentioning. So there is a listening session coming up on the local food purchase assistance program. And again, this is that USDA cooperative agreement program that's going to make funding available to the state that can be used to purchase food crops from farmers throughout the state. So there's going to be a listening session hosted by U of I Extension coming up, and hopefully we'll have more information about how that program is going to work and how folks can participate. And then next slide. And just recently we had the local foods conference hosted by the Illinois Farm Bureau and partners, and they recognized the three most recent recipients of the Illinois Farmer Veteran of the Year Award. And I just wanted to call out that we did have Anthony Furchi with Garlic Breath Farm in Elgin was the first recipient of that program. So we just wanted to acknowledge him as well as all of the other veteran farmers in the county. And that's it for that slide deck.
Are there any questions? Madam Chairman, I think you really always wanted to be a farm girl. So you could get out and enjoy nature and.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely. There's but if I have to work it, I'm not going to be aesthetically enjoying it as much. So I like the aesthetic of it, probably right now.
Come over to your farm.
And I will.
And
yeah.
an intern program.
And
Very bad, very
a
low.
couple of weeks and I'll gladly come back here. I do have a question though, regarding the farmland that you showed us very first slide that showed where the exceptional land is, the soil. I would assume going forward, and this is probably more of a question for Mark with zoning, are we protecting that from urban development? I know we have the 2040 plan, but it is my understanding that if that property is annexed by a village or municipality, that land use can simply change.
Sure, but both are correct. Mark Van Kerkhoff, the 2040 plan is and the land use strategy is the basis for the county to protect agricultural land from conversion and other land uses. And also signals to the agricultural community that they can and should continue to make those kind of investments in their soils and land to keep them sustainable and viable into the future. So that's all an important part of keeping the farming ecosystem strong in Kane County. And you are correct that if a municipality does annex the land, the county board loses land use authority. So we have seen those conversions happen. We've had, over the last 4 decades, a number of different, growth spurts in the economy that have resulted in more land use, but changes. But it has been the county board's 2020 plan, then 2030 plan, now 2040 plan, and the conceptual land use strategy that has helped educate municipal decision makers about the importance of reinvestment in the urban corridor and opportunities to not just do greenfields development. The other thing the county board did with the latest, well, not so late now, but the Growing for Kane ordinance was to expand our agricultural easement program so that it could include new easements to be anywhere in the county where the original program emphasized easements in the western part of the county, as well as introduce the possibility of term easements, which for some of those areas that may, in the next 20, 30, 50 years be needed for community growth. We could protect those in a term easement and have those in local food growing use for the next 10, 20, 30 years as an interim protection. So we have a couple of tools that we're working with.
Because I think a farmer once told me that King County has some of the best soil in the state of Illinois. And then to remind me that once it's gone, it's gone.
All right, Mr. Arnold?
The question on tillage practices, 37% of the farmland in the nation is no-till. That's 29% in Illinois, and it ranges from a high. Yeah. Who wants to guess what state has the most no-till acreage? It's a big surprise. Actually, it's Tennessee. And the lowest in the nation are Minnesota and California. And those are pretty intensive crops and generally on very, very flat land. But 29% in Illinois, 37% nationwide.
Chair?
I just wanted to add, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Sanchez here, not to nerd out, but the soil biota, when you're talking specifically about soil, it's microorganisms that are found in the soil, such as nematodes and mycorrhizae, the mycelium that become mushrooms. That's a huge part of that network in a healthy soil. That's, in my understanding, the real point of no-till is to not disrupt those systems that are happening in the soil because they provide more nutrients in a better way, better mechanism for delivery for our crops. So that's the biota. That small little piece is actually very important. Everything else rests on that.
Okay, we have another future farmer over here. He's going to raise mushrooms.
Our manager, maybe.
Mr. Chairman, Allen,
Debbie Allen, please.
I don't mean to break in on the wonderful mushroom conversation because it's so important, but just a couple of things, and maybe Mr. Van Kerkhoff and Mr. Tansley can correct me if I get any of this wrong. It might be a good time to bring out our 50-50-50 drawing again, just to remind people of how hard we were trying to encourage our municipalities to think of using the land, the most eastern land for growth, as opposed to just reaching out into farmland because it's, so close and available and empty and you don't have to do much to build on it. I thought that was a great drawing because it showed how intensely our people were looking into the future to say, here's what we've got, here's where we could head if we're careful. And so, let's try and do the good things. The other thing I wanted to mention was I think a farmer's land is his 401k or her 401k. So one of the things we tried to do with our farmland protection was to say, if you're predisposed to keep your farming going with your children and your grandchildren and so on, here's a way that we can help to keep that farmland financially viable for you by giving you money that might be used for more sophisticated equipment or the purchase of more land and so on. And then the third point I wanted to say was, I thought it was so innovative of our staff to come up with the idea that you don't have to have a big farm. We can help you protect a small farm. That's part of our Growing for Cane program, I believe, Mr. Tansley, was that if you have a small farm where you're growing some interesting crop, you can also protect that. You don't have to have a big farm to get protection. Thanks for letting me vent.
Thank you, and give me a call later on. We have to talk about our day coming up next month for the 4-H people.
Absolutely.
Water Resources, are we right for you? Is it her or you got another one?
I've got one more.
You're gonna have to hurry
quick. I'll
because
be brief on this.
we're getting charged extra minutes.
So this is an update on the livestock market assessment project, and I'm happy to say that we have concluded our search for a consultant, and today we're recommending a consultant that was evaluated by our review panel, and they scored very well on all of the criteria that we had developed in partnership with the purchasing department. And so we're putting them forward to recommend for the committee and the county board eventually to approve their proposal and contract. Next slide. And so the consultant is one that we've worked with before, and they've certainly demonstrated their experience. It's the Chicago-based New Venture Advisors. You can look at their experience, but I think one of the more important points is that they're familiar with Kane County's plans and policies as it relates to food and agriculture. And they've worked on other projects with neighboring municipalities as well. So we really feel that local knowledge is really going to make them a strong consultant to lead this market assessment. Next slide. And so they put together a summary based on what we were asking for and just kind of mapped out how they're going to go about this project. So that's a pretty logical sequence of this, project initiation and design. And then the market assessment phase is really going to be the bulk of the work and address the primary things that we're looking for, from production capacity analysis, demand analysis, and so forth. Next slide. And then toward the end of the project period, they did propose an in-person stakeholder meeting, which we really think is going to be a good opportunity for farmers to give more candid feedback and input, just because that's a forum that many are comfortable in as well. And then the last stage is just developing all of this information into a written report that will be graphically designed and include some mapping visualizations and an executive summary. Next slide. This is a breakdown of the cost proposal. So this just kind of prices out the different elements of the proposal that they made. It did include a couple of optional items or deliverables, and we did feel that these really provide good value for the project. So we are recommending including those in proceeding with those, including that in-person stakeholder meeting was one of those as well. So the total cost proposal is $71,000. Next slide. And this lastly is just a schedule of the proposed work. So you can just kind of see how the different phases of the work plan are sequenced throughout a 12-month project period. And so we do have a resolution accompanying this request. I just a clarification, there is an executive summary paired with this, but it was, you can disregard that because it's actually a duplicate of the other executive summary for the resolution to declaring Kane County's support for agriculture. So that's just a minor, you can just disregard that summary, but the resolution is in there. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
We'd need somebody to move that resolution.
Leonard will move it.
Alan
Roth will
sec-
second.
That's with second. Okay. Is there a need for discussion, Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask one or two questions. I understand that the cost would be approximately 70, not to exceed 75,000. In the resolution, we're getting 5,000 as a grant. Is the other 70,000, which is coming out of our 400 fund, the Kane County Economic Development Fund, is that already budgeted?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, so we have those funds available in Fund 400, but we're also working with Peter Phillips and the ARPA team and the ARPA committee to potentially get this refunded back from ARPA funds back to Fund 400. But they kind of want to see the plan before they finalize the eligibility. So we want to get the party started and we've got the funds available in Fund 400, but we're hoping to get those reimbursed with ARPA funds.
Good, I anticipated that. The other second part of my question on the, and I'm supporting this, but is the purpose of this resolution to show both the state and federal government the need for extra aid for local livestock farmers?
The resolution specifically is to approve the contract and to authorize.
But I mean, is the purpose of the contract to help show the loss and the expense during COVID to these livestock farmers and hopefully get some additional funding for them?
Well, we actually have some of that pretty well documented with the survey work that Matt and our partners have done in terms of the need, and it really exposed the vulnerability in the market and surveys that we did in terms of what's keeping them from expanding or moving into providing more, livestock. That's what this is going to address. So we're hoping that this will help make them make good decisions, but also if there are areas that the assessment comes up with that there be needed supports to support it locally, that we could use that to apply for additional funding.
Great, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions, discussion? Can we call the roll, please?
Allen,
Alan, I.
Juby,
Juby, I.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Williams, Roth,
Roth, yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
passes.
Passes. Is that all from your section?
Yes.
Can we go to water resources?
Thank you.
Another important thing.
Thank you. I have a quick update on a conference I attended at the end of January, the Illinois Association of Drainage District Conference. There was a few things that came out of that conference that are kind of key to the work that we're doing here. One presentation was about drainage debasements. If you're not familiar, if you are farming your land, typically there's different type of debasements that you can receive on your tax bill as credit. One of those is a flood debasement. That's a debasement that needs to be applied annually if you do have crop damage from a flooding event. However, there is also drainage debasement. So if you are in a drainage district and you're paying into that drainage district, there should be a reduction on your tax bill. I've spoken with Mark Armstrong 2 years ago and mentioned this to him. It was not being done in Kane County, and he has worked to set up that system. So if you are in a drainage district and aren't seeing that on your tax bill, please get a hold of me and we can work with Mark to get that rectified. There's not many counties in the state of Illinois that are doing this, even though it's a requirement. So we want to make sure that Kane County is a leader in this, especially as we have more and more drainage districts reactivate. Another presentation that was key to our climate action implementation plan was done by Mike Castellano at the University of Iowa. They're doing a lot of work with the importance of drainage and the efficiency of nitrogen use on fields. They're specifically looking at, if you aren't aware, nitrous oxide that's released to the atmosphere. If you're putting on too much fertilizer or the field is not well drained, nitrous oxide is actually 1 kilogram of nitrous oxide is equal to 298 kilograms of carbon dioxide. So it's a serious concern when we're talking about our greenhouse gases, and really ties in well with our climate action implementation planning. So we got some great information, had some conversations with Dr. Castellano after the conference, and we'll be working to present that information at the Kane County Farm Bureau meeting in March. Along with a presentation about the climate action planning that we're doing. So we should have some greenhouse gas information for them from Kane County farms, and some ideas to put forth to include in that climate action implementation plan. The last item Mr. Arnold had mentioned was a heavy item of discussion at the conference, which was House Bill 4412, specifically in regards to drainage districts and their loss of their capacity to review and permit any wind or solar fields that are within drainage districts and impacting drainage facilities. We certainly support the Illinois Farm Bureau's trailer bill. I did send that out in an email to all the committee members. We have spoken with our state's attorney, and they have concerns with our ability to enforce some of the provisions of our stormwater ordinance. If you're not aware, when we do have solar fields come in, we do require those solar fields to rebuild the agricultural drainage system through the field and reroute it around the solar field to ensure that our upstream farmers maintain that drainage, as well as the downstream impacts to potential farmers are addressed through our stormwater ordinance. So we're trying to work with Steve and the Farm Bureau to try to promote the addition of the requirement of our countywide stormwater ordinance for any of those agricultural drainage facilities that are outside of the purview of the drainage districts. And any kind of conversations that you could have with state representatives to support this initiative would be greatly appreciated as well. That's all I have.
Any questions? You didn't mention this water testing. Aren't we having water testing? February, March? If you have a private well?
Yeah, that might be
Yeah.
Steve.
It's in, Steve has it in his farm paper.
Yeah.
The Farm Bureau and the Kane DuPage Stormwater Conservation District do private well testing, and I believe that the kits need to be picked up by next Friday and returned to either office on Monday, March 6th.
Of course, today is National Chili Day and Banana Bread Day. Remember, my mother used to take the old bananas and make bread out of them. This is the highlights. We have another resolution here of Kane County support for agriculture. We'd like to have, we gave you that. I'd like to have that moved from here so it can be done at our March meeting.
Sanchez moves.
Seconds.
Okay, is there discussion on this? No need for discussion, we're ready to vote. Cook County.
Allen,
Allen, I.
Juby. Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Williams, Roth,
Roth, yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
passes.
It passes. I didn't bring the tickets for sale, but I'll have it next month. And do we want to have a quiz? Okay, what's the 96%?
Family owned farms,
Privately owned farms.
Huh?
family owned farms.
Family-owned farms. Okay. So you'll get, I'll give you a ticket for the pork chop
Oh, sweet.
barbecue.
Sweet, thank you.
And it's too bad we didn't get to see that, so I'm looking forward to seeing the thing and, on that. Now well, do we have to put our reports on file?
Leonard Moose,
Roth seconds.
With unanimous consent?
Yes.
Anybody opposed? None? Now we need a motion to adjourn.
Leonard Moose.
Roth seconds.
Roth seconds.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. So today's National